Hello, everyone, and welcome to our live stream here at Taking Off. We've got a really cool show tonight, and we've lined up our guests from our most popular show ever. So what I'm going to do real quick is rushing in from somewhere is our very own Christy Wong. Christy, what in the world, where are you?
I am in the hangar.
You are in the hangar. That is awesome. So you're rushing in from what?
I just got done with my systems validation and my procedures validation with Envoy. So that's what I was doing today.
What does that entail?
A lot of work and a lot of stressing out. So really what it is it's essentially the oral portion of your ATP check ride. You get validated that you know the systems and all the procedures, prepares you to go into the sims. So that's what I did. I have proven that I am ready to go into the simulator. That's the next step. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I thought you'd already been in the simulator.
So I have for my ATP CTP, we went into simulators.
That's a lot of initials.
It is. Yeah, you got to love acronyms if you're in aviation.
Yes, you do. So, okay. So you're out here with the Wong Warrior?
Actually, right now I'm here with the Club's 182.
Okay.
Doing a quick run up. We're doing some troubleshooting with the manifold pressure gauge.
Okay. Well,
yeah, the Wong Warrior is literally right down here, though. So.
Okay. Well, all right. So while we're doing that, let's talk about tonight. We're going to have a really, really cool show because by far and away, our most popular episode ever was having Dan Bass on. And, you know, that was, you know, we talked to him for like 45 minutes, and I feel like we could have gone an hour and 45 minutes. We left so much meat on the bone. What do you think?
Oh, no, absolutely. I could have spent like a couple of hours with Dan. He's fascinating. That story is just, I had so many questions, but I was just in so much awe. I just sat there and listened.
Right. Well, what I'm doing is making sure Dan hasn't quite joined us yet. So what I want to do is talk. I'm going to go ahead and show, for those who don't know the Dan Bass story, Christy, I'll go ahead and mute you for a minute while you open that.
Sure.
And what I'm going to do is show for everybody a little piece about his story and what it is. So for those who don't know, this is the Dan Bass story.
I was in the run-up area long enough that the tower had actually called me and said, "Are you ready to take off?"
Mooney, 4-9er, Victor, you ready to go? You need a few more minutes yet. Yeah, we're just about ready to go.
And I sort of responded with, yeah, I guess I will be in a minute.
Oh, wow.
And then I didn't respond after that. I was still doing a checklist, and the tower about a minute later just cleared me for takeoff.
Mooney, 4-9er, Victor, turn left heading 240, runway 27, clear for takeoff. All right, left 240, clear for takeoff, One Victor. We're going to go now.
And when I listen to those, I can tell from me getting my clearance that I was impaired. But in the moment, I had no idea. And I remember they cleared me to a left turn. They gave me a heading of 240. And I remember in the turn, I turned my heading bug to it and hit a heading hold on the autopilot. And then that particular autopilot only had altitude hold. And then I could heading or nav or GPS steer. So I had it trimmed for climb of about 105 knots in that airplane. So I was 105 knots, full rich mixture, full power, gears up, and trim for climb. When I get direct to clearances in that airplane, like muscle memory, I'd hit the GPS steer button. So I'd do that and then hit GPS steer. And in this particular case, I remember doing that, but I didn't hit the GPS steer button.
So it stayed on heading mode?
It stayed on heading, yeah.
Mooney, 9er 1, 4-9er Victor, Duluth. If you hear Duluth, ident or acknowledge, please. 1 X-ray, you hear Duluth okay?
Loud and clear on both transmitters, helicopter 4-9er 1 X-ray.
And the very next thing I remember is waking up, and I thought I was flying. I started keying the mic to tell ATC I dozed off. I don't know where I am, but I'm okay, and I need to come and land. And as I'm doing this, I'm just kind of staring straight ahead. And I remember thinking, man, my window looks really, really clear. This is amazing. It's just beautiful. and I've tried, I live in the Mississippi River Valley, and the bugs are unbelievable there. I mean, in the early evening, you come in, it looks like you're descending into fog, and it's bugs. And so I would polish my window all the time, try to get it as nice as I could. And here I was proud of myself because of how good it looked. This is incredible. And as I'm sort of keying the mic and I'm looking out the beautiful window, I sort of reached forward to just feel the window, and then I realized it wasn't there. And at that point, I started looking around, and there's trees off to my left, and I realized I was actually on the ground.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And yeah, we're looking at pictures of it.
Yeah, there it is.
Amazing. So, okay. So you look around, but it was at night, right?
Yeah. Yep, it was
So
at
you
night,
could-
so I couldn't.
You could see the trees, or?
Yeah, I could see the trees a little bit to the night. There was no moon this night, but there was no clouds. It was a nice day to fly, other than being really cold. And so the stars were really brilliant out in the field in the middle of nowhere. And when I first realized I was on the ground and that started to sink in, I looked off to my right, and about a mile away, I could see a searchlight in the field.
Wow.
And I knew right away that was someone looking for me. I just assumed I was on IFR flight plan. I was talking to ATC. They would be looking for me. So my next order of business was to try to get out of the airplane until where I saw that light.
Just a real quick recap from our episode with the Dan Bastille story. So bring Christy back in here. Christy, now you're with the Wong Warrior, is that right?
I am with the Wong Warrior.
All right, cool. Which, by the way, I just got to the office for the first time in weeks, and Joe Carvalho sent us both some mugs. So I have a mug here for you. LearnToFly.com. So thanks,
Thank
Joe.
you.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate that.
And yes, that is not coffee, it's Diet Coke. And somebody was asking about how in the world it's gold. It's because it's caffeine-free Diet Coke. So, but anyway, all right. So that is the nutshell of the Dan Bastille story. And Christy, let me ask you this. Do you still have those horrible CO tabs in the Wong Warrior?
So I have one, but we also got that digital one in the Wong Warrior. So we have the really good digital one that Dan recommended. But
SensorCon?
yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's really critical, and I'm glad to hear that. I'm actually carrying two now, and what's funny is that it seems like somebody did a review on the 3 different CO detectors, and I have now owned all 3. And when they did the review, it was like the first one to really beep and the first one to beep at you, and the guy thought that was the best one, but it's really not. I'd rather that be accurate. The accurate test is, I don't want the thing beeping at me all the time if I'm okay. So anyway, I like the SensorCon one. The other one that I have, which is a less expensive one, but still electronic, it beeps when there's 10 parts per million or whatever it is. And that's just about all the time. So, well, not all the time. I don't want you to think I'm about to die in Lola, but it's certainly a lot more than anything else. All right. So I'm still, I've reached out to Dan. He must be having trouble getting on, but he's coming. So Christy, for our audience that's just coming in, we're getting more and more people watching as they're tuning in. You are still training for Envoy. That has not ended. That has not stopped. So
yes,
tell us
I am still in
tell us
training.
about that.
Yeah, so I just finished my systems validation today, which is essentially like the oral portion of the ATP check ride. I've basically proven that I know the systems, I know the procedures, and I'm ready to go into the simulators. So I actually get a week off, and then next week I will start simulator training, and that's about 2 weeks worth of, you go into the sims practically every day, 4 hours at a time, and you learn basically everything, all the emergency procedures and everything, so.
All right, well, cool. Hey, since we're talking about what you've got, did you hard mount the SensorCon unit in the Wong Warrior?
No, it's not. I can take you on a quick tour.
Yeah, let's take a look at it real quick. Yeah.
Okay.
And Brian Turner, just to warn you, Brian wants to drive out and sneak in behind you and scare you.
Oh, okay. Thanks for the heads up. Okay. All right, everybody, welcome to the Wong Warrior.
All right, good.
My awesome seats, my Lysol wipes.
Hey, why didn't you go in through the pilot side? I'm not sure what's going on here.
Here. All right. So we stuck it
She
down
didn't hear
here.
me.
I did. I just chose not to respond. Okay. So here it is right here. And it's not hard mounted, but we did clip it down here. So it basically stays down here by the flaps.
Okay, yours looks a lot different than mine.
Oh.
Can you show me a close-up of that again? Can you pull it up and into the light?
Let's see. I don't know. I thought this was the one that he recommended.
I think you got the even higher dollar version than I did. That looks even better than what I have. So, yeah, nice. Oh, you got the forensics. You didn't get the SensorCon. You got one of the other ones.
Got it. Okay.
So okay, so that's the one you got. I got mine's a little bit different.
Oh.
I don't have it here with me to show you guys, but
fun fact, I was trying to read that.
Well, it's upside down.
I know. When Steve first did it, though, I was like, what does that say? I was having one of those days.
All right, but the point is that these, whether it's the forensic, it's a SensorCon, or it's the one that Sporty sells, the whole idea here is that it doesn't rely on you to glance over and see a chiclet turn color that you may or may not notice and may not be in your flow, but it's something that's going to make a very loud, audible warning if the CO gets too high in the cabin, which is
affirmative.
Critical, as we know from the Dan Bastille Story. So.
Yes. And that concludes our tour of the Wong Warrior.
All right, very cool. So I am still trying to reach out to Dan and get him on here. We tested this earlier with him. So be thinking about your questions that you want to ask him. We've had the #1 question that everybody has asked is how in the world did that Mooney land itself? And I think quite a few people actually don't believe he passed out. I mean, a plane landing itself seems far-fetched.
Well, it landed itself, but he broke a bunch of bones and had a whole bunch of injuries. And I mean,
yeah.
So it's not like the airplane just smoothly came in and landed. I mean, it ran out of fuel and it gracefully floated down, from my understanding. But the physics are there, like it could work.
Okay. We actually have made contact with Dan, and he's having a little bit of something's not right. So I'm going to send him a new link and get that. So he says he is logged in. I do not see him here. Okay. So anyway, guys, while we're waiting for him, does anybody have questions so far? You know, we got Dan coming on, and we can certainly ask him those. But
does anybody have any questions for me
about the Wong Warrior?
Yeah, more about the Wong.
You know what? I keep saying the Wong Warrior, but you've actually got a name for her. What is it?
Her name is Sweet Caroline.
That's right, your middle name.
Yes, my middle name is Caroline. Everybody knows that, of course, if you've seen me on Facebook. But yeah, she. I don't know why we felt that it would be appropriate to name the airplane after me, but
yeah,
it is my airplane. But yeah, her name is Sweet Caroline, but she's affectionately known as the Wong Warrior.
Yeah, probably one of the most famous Piper Cherokee Warrior 2s out there.
I have gotten recognized a few times at the training center. People have actually referred, like I've had instructors that recognized me and they were like, oh, the famous North Texas, aviators, Christy Wong. And I was like, oh yeah, that's me.
Yeah. All right. We're still working on getting Dan in here. And all right. So what I'm going to do real quick while we still work out the technical glitches is that we've played the long version, but we already have like 30 more people on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the short version, which is just the 1-minute trailer for this. So everybody hang on. Let's watch the trailer for this.
Some of us have heard the apocryphal story. Pilot flying, falling asleep in his plane, and waking up in a field.
I was unconscious due to carbon monoxide poisoning. So I had it trimmed for climbing.
Good afternoon. Departure Mooney 90149
At that point, I thought I have to tell them I have to go back and land.
Here, Duluth Tower or Duluth Approach, could you ident?
Mooney 90149 Victor. Duluth, how do you hear?
And the very next thing I remember is waking up. And I thought I was flying. I started keying Mike to tell ATC I dozed off. I sort of reached forward to just feel the window, and then I realized it wasn't there. Started looking around, and there's trees off to my left, and I realized I was actually on the ground. I made it up through the woods, and then I turned, and I could see a house, and there was a blue flicker of a TV in the window, and it was just the greatest sight I've ever seen.
There's a lot to take away on this. So
it was an incredible story.
Okay, so that is our trailer for Dan Bass. And he's moving over to a different type of technology to try to join us. And we'll see how that works. All right, so Christy, have you ever been afraid of carbon monoxide poisoning?
I can't say that I've been afraid of it. I'm hyper aware of it, though, especially after talking with Dan Bass.
Were you before?
Honestly, no.
Well, I remember in my private pilot training, you know, we talked about it for ground school right before flight and that kind of stuff. So, you know, we had talked about it, and I remember my takeaway from the carbon monoxide poisoning was that it was poisoning. That was what my instructor really emphasized. It's not like hypoxia. Hypoxia, if you're hypoxic, you can take oxygen and be fixed instantaneously almost.
Right.
But with CO poisoning, it's poisoning. It stays in your blood. I mean,
Right.
You are poisoned. It's not like you can get clean air and then go fly again real quick.
Well, you know what really made me hyper aware was the fact that, you know, because like you said before, we read in books that it's kind of this gradual process and it'll happen like this. And if you get tired, if you get a headache, but from what Dan said and in reading up after like the story, it's by the time you realize those things are happening, it's too late. You're already impaired, so you're not thinking clearly.
Yeah.
So that's what's made me hyper aware.
Well, and as you remember from Dan's story, you know, his carbon monoxide poisoning wasn't just in the flight that he went unconscious. That was just the final leg. He had flown all day in the plane, so it was an accumulative effect. And you know, as he talked about in the hangar show, he missed the markers. He missed the indications that something was wrong. And the more you go into it, it's almost like being inebriated. The more you go into it, the less clear you think, and rational decision making goes out the door.
Right, that's correct.
So, all right. So Dan's trying to call in on his phone. So hang on just a minute for that. So Christy, let me ask you this. So I know we're bouncing around a whole bunch, and that's what happens in live broadcast.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. What's next for you for Envoy?
So once I pass my LOE, or line observation evaluation, I think that's what that stands for. It's basically the check ride. Once I get done with that, I'll go to IOE, which is initial operating experience. And so that's when I get into the airplanes with a line check airman and demonstrate my proficiency in the airplane. And I'll do that for about 25 hours of flying. And then after that, they'll sign off on me. And as long as I do well, and then I'll be able to fly the line.
Wow, so that's pretty quick. How long has it taken you to go from 0 to this point?
It's been just over 3 years now.
Okay.
But you got to remember, I mean, there's a lot of 141 programs out there that will get you from 0 to hero or 0 to 1500 in, a year or two. But I was a Part 61 pilot, and I worked full time while flight training. So, and as soon as I got my CFI, that's basically when I decided to leave my previous career in allergy and focus on flying full time. And that's when I started instructing, and yeah.
Have you ever, the FAA provides for anybody who wants to, if they want to go to Oklahoma City, a hyperbaric pressure thing, so you can see how your body reacts to hypoxia. Have you ever done that?
I have not, but I want to. I wonder if they'd let us take cameras.
I don't know. Well, we've got our new FAA friend, Rob Lowe, maybe once this virus thing is down.
Yeah.
Which
I would love to do it. So.
I know for me what my signs are for becoming hypoxic, and I'll start to get tunnel vision, headache, and that kind of stuff. But hypoxia, it affects people in different ways. And I imagine the same thing with carbon monoxide poisoning, although there are some things everybody experiences. But Dan talked about how for him, he had that almost anxiety attack that he had on several occasions that came on and then went away just about as fast.
Yeah.
So, all right. We're still working it out with Dan. He's trying a different browser right now. I had something I was going to ask you. Now I don't remember. But anyway, all right. I'm doing 3 things at once here. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about the coronavirus. How has that affected you and your training? How are you doing social distancing while you're doing envoy training?
We're doing very small groups. They've put a lot of restrictions in place there at the training center. They've taken extra precautions, and again, we don't go into the little training rooms with more than 1 or 2 other people. So it hasn't really affected my training so far in a negative way. It's been different. Obviously everybody's concerned about what's going on in the outside world. As you can see, I am happily socially distancing here alone with the Wong Warrior. We will not be staying 6 feet apart.
I was about to say, you and Caroline are not 6 feet apart.
No, we are not, but that's okay. I mean, if she's got the corona, then I definitely have it.
Right. Well, and I'm being very careful. I've got my gloves here. I've got a face mask, and I've got my EPA approved household surface wipes. I'm being very careful. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to be going back out in Lola tomorrow, and I think I'm going to shoot. I've done a ton of research, gone to the CDC website. I'm going to do a quick video on how to properly sanitize your airplane, because a lot of people.
What time are you doing that?
Probably in the morning at some point.
Okay.
Because a lot of people are renting aircraft, and even during this time, it's probably a good idea to know how to do it.
Well, you saw my Lysol wipes in the back of the Wong Warrior, so.
All right, and the good news is we have Dan here with us. He has connected. He gave me a sign saying, "Hang on just a minute." He probably went to go get his drink, and yeah, he did actually. All right, without further ado, Christy, why don't we bring in Dan?
Welcome, Dan.
Dan Bass, thank you so much.
Thanks. Sorry about that.
I don't know what the thing was doing.
Well, I do. I was using Firefox for my browser, and it didn't like it, and I downloaded Chrome, and we're good to go.
Okay. So I don't know if you've been able to listen while we were working out the bugs for your thing. Hey, I like how you've got a prop.
That isn't
prop right there.
That isn't even a prop. It's just my office.
Well, mine's actually a prop, and I keep doing the wrong thing. But anyway, did you say you were listening to what we were saying?
Partially. I was hit or miss. I had to log out a few times.
All right. So we have explained to people your story. I played a short clip of your story. Most of the people that are in here now have seen that, so I think they know. But just for our sakes, can you real quick, real briefly recap what happened?
Okay. Well, most of the people hopefully do know. It's hard for me to do this story real quick, but
Yeah.
I had 3 flights during a particular day, and on the 3rd flight, I lost consciousness because of carbon monoxide poisoning, and the airplane continued on with me not awake. And after about an hour and a half, it ran out of fuel and descended, and some people say landed, I say crashed into a field. And I woke up sometime after and was able to make my way to help.
Yeah. Okay. Christy, you want to ask him the #1 question we've been getting?
How in the world did that airplane land itself?
That's what everybody wants to know. Is like, how did it do it?
Well, I'm just really good. That's basically all there's to it.
You can fly in your
If you really want to practice, get a safety pilot and go up and take naps and see how it turns out. Well, there was an awful lot of luck, obviously. Divine intervention, possibly. It was a million things had to go just right for me to have the good outcome. But in terms of aerodynamics and what happened with the airplane, it was very textbook. It wasn't anything extraordinary. As you know, anyone who goes through private training, they're exposed to constant airspeed climbs and descents. And that's essentially what happened. So I took off and I turned to a heading and was climbing. And in the climb, I trimmed the airplane for my cruise climb. And then that airplane was about 120 miles an hour. So right at about 105 knots. I lost consciousness. And then the airplane was trimmed for that speed or angle of attack. And it just stayed there. So as it climbed, the airplane lost power because I had full rich mixture, and it developed less and less power as it was climbing higher. Even if I leaned it, it would have went higher yet, which was real fortunate for me that it didn't. But the airplane just climbed up to 12,500 feet, 12,800 feet right in there. And that was where it hit its equilibrium. That was with full rich mixture. That was the most, or that power was required to maintain the 105 or 120 miles an hour or 105 knots. And then it just kind of lumbered along there. And as it ran out of gas, I was running on just one of the tanks. I had 16 gallons in the other tank, but it ran out of gas in the left tank. It just descended then at that same 105 knots all the way to the ground. And my flight aware track, when we go back and look at it, it was about 105 knot ground speed the entire time. So I guess actually it would have been, I would have been a little faster or I would have been indicating slower at altitude, but that angle attack would have been similar.
Wow. And during that time that you were passed out, one thing we didn't talk about in the show, you went through a busy class Bravo, right?
I went over it. Yeah,
right.
I didn't go through it. I went over it. So that made ATC a little nervous because I was heading kind of that direction. I went right over St. Paul Airport, so just to the east of Minneapolis, St. Paul, the Class Bravo Airport.
And did they scramble jets?
What was that?
Did they scramble jets?
Yeah, that's my understanding. Obviously I don't remember it, but they 2 F-16s from Madison, Wisconsin's Air National Guard wing there scrambled, and they met me just on the south side of the Bravo, is my understanding. It was nighttime, so I don't know what they could have saw or did, but my understanding is they did intercept me. They were with me a short time, and then they headed back to Madison. I'm assuming they didn't have, a lot of fuel for that type of mission.
So it's not standard procedure to kind of follow you all the way through until you're on the ground, I guess?
Well, I think they probably would have. I'm guessing they didn't have a lot of fuel. So for an F-16 to get from Madison to me and then be able to get back, I think they would have been cutting fuel reserves really close had they loitered there.
Yeah.
And they realized there wasn't anything they could do, I suppose.
So, Christy, I'm asking all the questions. Did you want to jump in?
I mean, I know we asked a lot of these questions during the show, but it was just, wow. when did the pain really start kicking in? I know you said when you started coming to, you weren't really in pain, but then the pain started coming through. Like, how long did that take?
Well, I don't, the whole thing, I never had that much pain, I guess. I mean, I remember
Incredible.
discomfort and not wanting to push through. But it didn't, I mean, overall, it really wasn't that much pain. I experienced a lot of adrenaline, I think. And and like I said, a lot of, no oxygen in my system. So that helped.
Well, yeah, right. What about afterward, like during the recovery?
That wasn't horrible. I knew I had a broken back. There was some dull pains, occasionally a sharp pain, but it wasn't bad. I was very,
no big deal. Had a broken back, just a little twinge every now and then.
Yeah. Well, it's when you have accidents, people tend to bring you their stories, and it just makes me feel like I got off so easy because I've met so many people who've had bad motorcycle accidents and car accidents and have fallen out of tree stands, and it really wasn't a bad deal.
Did it scare you away from flying?
No, not at all.
Wow.
But I wasn't conscious, so I didn't really experience it.
Yeah, you didn't experience the trauma of actually crashing.
Yeah.
No, well, I definitely am more cautious now. I tell people that it took an innocence away from flying that I'd felt before, which was good because there's nothing innocent about flying. We should never have that kind of complacency. But I truly was one of those pilots, and I think most of us are, that even as safety-minded as we want to be, we always think in the back of our mind it's not going to happen to us. And I definitely had that mentality. And now every accident report I read, no matter how foolish the pilot was, I can sympathize and put myself in that situation a lot easier than I could before.
Huh. One question we're getting from Rusty on the site is asking, when you set that GPS, had you not set the GPS button or the autopilot, you had wings leveler, what do you think would have been the outcome?
Well, someone smarter than me could tell me how a Garmin 530 behaves. Or you mean if I hadn't set the autopilot at all?
Well, yeah, let's start with that.
Okay. Well, the Mooney is a really stable airplane. It helped in this situation. They're really, really stable in pitch, which helped with that constant airspeed climb and descent. But every airplane, is just a little wing heavy or a little bit one way or the other. If I didn't set any autopilot, there's no way I would have survived. The airplane, this airplane did pretty well, but if you let it fly hands off for a few minutes, it would start to fall off to one side. So I definitely wouldn't have survived. I was considering before I passed out that I needed to disconnect the autopilot and return to the airport. And I'm confident if I did that, I wouldn't have survived because I would have lost consciousness with autopilot off. And then with the other thing that happened was I put my direct clearance into the 530, and I normally go and hit my GPS steer button, so then it immediately turns. And I didn't do that. And I'm kind of curious what would have happened had I done that. I would have got to my destination still relatively high. I wouldn't have ran out of gas yet. And I was wondering what the 530 does with that information when it gets to the termination of its flight plan, and I'm using GPS steer. Does the airplane hold there, or does it just revert back to heading mode and heading bug and keep going? I have no idea.
I think because I have a 430, I think that if I finish the last magenta line, it's just going to keep going in that same direction.
Okay.
I don't know about the 530, but I know the 430 would just keep going in the same direction.
I'm sure it would have done the same thing, and that would have put me. It would have put me in a different area running out of gas, which had similar terrain. Yeah.
That's a roll of the dice as far as landing. And I remember on the YouTube site, one comment somebody made who lives in California was like, there was no way they would have survived with all the hills, mountains, and
yeah. I mean, Midwest is fantastic for engine outs and that type of thing. The only other time this had really happened was that Comanche 400 in 1997. And that guy was in Missouri, so same thing. He had loads of farmland, and
Right.
got very lucky also.
One question somebody's asked, and although it's a little bit of a funny question, I think it's interesting. How did you log this flight in your book?
That is good. Well, I just logged it like any other flight. I was joking with the FAA investigator when he came and visited, and I said, "Can I log that last hour and a half, and I'm going to log the landing? Is that okay?" I'm just going to. And he goes, "Absolutely."
I was going to say, how did you
worry.
log that landing?
Yeah, I logged it.
So, as a night landing too.
It's a night. Yep, help with night currency, and full stop. But yeah, and unfortunately, there's not a column in your logbook, for the unconscious night landing. That's a hard one to do.
That's awesome. That is awesome. I'm glad they asked that question. How has the insurance company been for you?
Fantastic. I'm not promoting one or the other, but I was insured by Global at the time, and the underwriter was great. The adjuster, I should say, was fantastic and helped me through the process, and it was very painless and easy. So they really came through for me. I appreciated it.
For those that are watching and commenting, I'd like to know how many of you guys have now bought CO audible detectors and in your planes after hearing Dan's story. I'm curious about that. I had one before, but Christy did. And
I did.
So jump on the comments and let us know that. In the meantime, while they're commenting on that, Dan, let's go back to the plane landing.
Okay, I'm going to go back to answer Christy's question about the pain.
Yeah.
I don't remember the pain, but my wife texted me just now, and she reminded me that I almost passed out several times from the pain 24 hours later. So I don't really remember that, but she's
you have that like that pain amnesia is what you're experiencing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I think our bodies do that kind of stuff to help insulate, I guess, trauma.
Yeah.
So.
And also childbirth, because I swear to God, if we remembered what that was like,
it would never happen
we would
again.
have one kid, and that would be it.
Yep.
I promise you.
I can't speak to that, and really don't want to speak to that.
No.
There's a question. Somebody wants to know if you replaced your airplane.
If I replaced it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Of course. Yeah, I bought another Mooney about 5 months after it happened.
Of course you did.
But this time I got a 231, which is it's the mid body and it's turbocharged. So it's a significant performance upgrade.
Did you keep anything off of the Mooney?
What was that?
Did you keep anything? Sorry, did you keep anything off of the old Mooney?
Yeah, the only thing it's in my office right over here. Is the nose gear door.
Wow.
We went and visited the crash site and visited the Crabtree family where I had hiked to, and they had a great story. They said their grandkids were visiting the weekend after, I think, this happened, and they sent them out in the field to look for airplane parts to keep them busy, and I don't think they thought there'd be any, and one of their grandsons, I believe, found that at the impact site, and so I'll go grab it. Why not? Yeah. So it's it's the gear, the right front nose gear door. Still has the tire pressure.
Oh wow.
Deal in there, and so I kind of left the dirt on it and everything, and it's kind of nice. I have that, and then I keep that in my office here, and then this is my knee board.
Wow.
It's kind of all bent up, and this is real thick aluminum, and it's still the same piece of paper. I know I have my fuel here, and I got my clearance, so kind of a good reminder of how violent it was and how lucky I am.
Yeah, I think that people, I think, hear your story and they think you just landed just fine, and so they don't believe it. They don't believe that an airplane.
I don't believe it.
It is almost unbelievable, though. That's why this is an incredible story.
Yeah. And like I say, it's happened a few times. There's amazing stories out there in the world. There's, this has happened again with that Comanche. There's someone on my last video commented about the cornfield bomber. I don't know if you guys know that story, but it's unbelievable. And then that woman too in South America that came out of the, well, I don't remember what kind of airplane that was, where she fell 9,000 feet in her seat and lived. So there's all sorts of interesting stories.
I remember that one. That one, I think that was the story about she was on an airliner.
Yeah, she was the only survivor.
Yeah, she was the only survivor.
That's
and it
right.
got struck by lightning and all this other stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, so weird stuff happens. Dan, what has been lasting physical effects from this crash?
Well, I'm wearing a retainer right now. I'm missing some teeth.
Okay.
So that's one of them. I'm going to try to fix that still. And then my hands, I have some feeling loss in my fingertips from the frostbite. But other than that, I don't think there's any long-term physical effects.
Your broken back is all healed and everything?
Yeah, that was a pretty minor break. That was another thing. I started talking to medical professionals, orthopedic surgeons and stuff, and I was really kind of run-of-the-mill, some crushed vertebrae. It wasn't a real big deal.
Crushed vertebrae, it's not.
Yeah, well, it happens to people all the time. They'll fall off a stepladder and it'll happen, so I was very lucky. That was I had to wear a back brace for about 12, 13, 14 weeks, something like that, and it really wasn't too big of an inconvenience. So,
all right, before we continue on with the questions, I want to point out the flying controller, Matt Wells, has been on and helping, and Matt Wells is our producer for the show, and Matt is behind the scenes. He's there, able to answer some of your questions on the chat. So I just want to give a shout out and a thank you to Matt Wells. And Matt, I appreciate you coming on and doing this. So, Matt, what do you think about this story? You're a pilot in addition to being a controller. Have you always had CO detectors in your plane?
Hey, Dan. Thanks for having me on again. No, I have not. I've flown with you enough to know that you have one and it works. I know that Christy has one because I flew her airplane this morning. And obviously encouraging all the other airplane owners that I fly their airplanes to have one. But thinking about that, probably wouldn't hurt for me to just add that to my flight bag and just, I could just carry one with me personally, and I can put it somewhere where I can see, go fly, and then when I'm done, just take it out if the airplane doesn't have one. From a controller's perspective, I love this story for a lot of reasons. The controllers that you could hear that were talking to him, or at least trying to get a hold of him, where they sensed something was wrong, and and after things like this happen, we get it comes down through the lines, and we hear these stories. I had training, I don't know, 6 months ago or something, where it was actually a local pilot in DFW. They went up to, I think it was to test the pressurization system on a citation, and the second they passed like 15,000 feet, they stopped responding. The controller didn't exactly handle it the best way, and that was the story that we learned out of it. But the signs of lack of oxygen, of CO2 possibly happening or whatever, all that was integrated into one little presentation. And it's like, hey, listen, if you hear this, if you observe this, this is what it could mean, and this is what you should do. And it's just it's a good level up for some of us that didn't know. I mean, obviously in the tower environment, I don't see a lot of that because everyone I talk to is below 3,000 feet. But for controllers like Scott Pinkerton, the forward center, I'm sure that he could encounter that a lot more than me. But yeah, I love this story. This is a great story.
Yeah. All right. Well, Matt, thank you. And I'm going to send you back behind the curtain, and I appreciate you helping out.
Yeah, just kind of talk about the controllers a little bit. So there's the audio of the controllers coming out of Duluth. But then what was neat, I have the entire transcript of all the controllers I flew through their sector. So I went right over Minneapolis TRACON and Minneapolis Center on both ends, and then also Rochester Approach Control. And all of them were trying to get in touch with me. And when I when I got my phone the next day, not when I came to, but when I got my phone the next day, I was able to see I had, I don't remember, 7 or 8 text messages from various controllers along the way saying, hey, if you can hear me, call us. I think I had 6 phone messages from controllers.
Wow.
And incidentally, one of the Minneapolis Tracon controllers, while I was flying overhead, he Googled my in number to try to relay information for search and rescue, colors of the plane, what it looks like. And he stumbled across my wife's Facebook posts and saw that I'd had it at Oshkosh with my family in it. And he had kids similar ages and stuff. And so he reached out to my wife a couple weeks later, and then it's got in touch with me, and I've gotten to meet up with him and some of the other Tracon guys, and it's been really neat.
That's cool. I was afraid you were going to say that he reached out to your wife while you were in the plane.
Yeah, no. Only one person I knew had knowledge of what was going on during the time, and that's an interesting story. We have a little bit of time. I'll just go through it quick. Anyone had ever seen the movie Grumpy Old Men? Have anyone seen that?
Yes, I love that movie. Love
okay.
it.
Well, that was the character that Anne Margaret had or played was written after a professor at Winona State University in my hometown here. Her name is Vivian Fusillo, and she's very much like Anne Margaret's character in real life. And her significant other is George Boland, and he runs the Winona Airport. He is in charge of the aviation program at the Winona State University. And so he knew me. He's known me almost my entire life. And they called him on the phone while I was in the air to try to get any more information about the fuel system of the airplane, how long I might be in the air, et cetera, et cetera. And when he got off the phone, he was with Vivian, and he was very down, and he said, Dan Bass is going to die, or has died, and he said he was leaving a wife and those kids behind. And in her colorful way, she said, oh, for God's sakes, be more positive, would you? He's going to be just fine. And I'm guessing that was the only person in the world that believed I was going to be okay at that moment, that knew what was happening. So I owe a great bit of gratitude towards her.
Wow.
That's amazing. Somebody wants to know what caused the malfunction and the carbon monoxide buildup.
The malfunction was a crack in my exhaust, right in the heat, right in the muffler where the heat shroud goes over. What caused the crack, we don't really know. It didn't look like it was a corrosion issue. It looked more like it was a metal fatigue stress kind of crack. And on that airplane, it's 4 into 1, and it's right in the bottom. So it was split right in the middle. So I think it was the slip joints weren't slipping enough or something. The flight before this day, I had a backfire at startup, which could have caused the crack, or it could have made it worse, more than likely. But that's all we know. The exhaust wasn't that old. I remember seeing comments, people saying, well, don't they check this at annual, or who does this annual? And we do check it at every annual, and we do a light pressure test and soap it and that kind of stuff. And there was about 89 hours on the exhaust, or since the annual. And the exhaust itself wasn't all that old. It was about 730 hours, if I remember right, since new.
That's really young.
Yeah.
Because even when you change an engine, you might not change the exhaust system. It's most of the time you do, but I mean, it could very easily have been 1,000 or 2,000 hours.
Yeah. And so the important thing to note is maintenance is very critical. You have to check the exhaust system, at an annual, but things break in between maintenance cycles, and that's what we have to worry about.
We've got another question. What would you do if you had a CO monitor go off on you now?
Okay, well, it depends on what it was telling me. The carbon monoxide detectors I use now are really high resolution ones, and they read in parts per million. They'll go off at 35 parts per million. So some of them will go off if I'm just doing a run up and it's windy, and I can figure out the source and why it's going off. Now, if it was north of that and I didn't understand why, I would go land. I would try to figure out how to get fresh air into the cabin. And there hasn't been a lot of tests on this, but it's sort of my belief if you want to figure out how to pressurize the airplane the best you can. So create a little bit of a higher pressure in the cabin than outside the cabin. If I were to just open the side window and the CO was coming through a leak, say in my firewall someplace, I might actually lower the pressure in the cabin and create a way to suck that in a little easier. On a Mooney, I've got a fresh air vent. On my particular Mooney now, I have a fresh air vent in the tail with a NACA duct. And so it's under fairly high pressure, and I can open that up, and I'm pretty confident that the air up above the fuselage is going to be CO free. So I would turn on all those vents. I would shut off the heat if it was coming through that way. I would land as soon as practicable. But it's really important to understand how to use a carbon monoxide detector and troubleshoot where it could be coming from. If it just randomly goes off in my plane, say, and there's no, it's not related to the heat, so I know it's some sort of an exhaust failure forward, it could be a pretty serious emergency. Being my airplane is turbocharged, it could be a broken V-band clamp. In a turbocharged airplane, any problem with the exhaust ahead of the turbocharger is under higher pressure than normally aspirated, higher temperatures, and it could start fires and end things. I mean, it could end poorly, quickly. I've spoken to all sorts of people that have found stuff with their carbon monoxide detectors, and one interesting one was he had a small rise, not enough to be real concerned, but he was wondering about it, and he went to inspect his airplane and figure out why, and he found that a slip joint had slipped out a little bit, and he didn't understand how that could even happen, so he looked at it further, and he added a broken engine mount. So the carbon monoxide detector led to finding a completely different problem that manifested itself with CO.
So where did you say is the best place to put your CO monitor? Like, where do you put it now in the airplane?
Well, the best place for any of them is where it's going to get your attention. So I like having mine in my field of view. It's on my panel. I like what, in Dan's videos, his old one was hung right in the middle of the panel, right up on the top. And that's great because most of the portable ones aren't very loud, but they all have audible or visual lights and things. So it's good to have it in your scan. They make the panel mount units have the ability to be wired into your intercom. And that's even better if you get an audible alert. There's one on the market now that goes underneath your headset and gives you an audible alert. So it's just important to have it where it'll get your attention. Like in the back in the flight bag isn't necessarily the best.
No, yeah.
Or on the floor low.
Yeah, down on the floor low where you don't hear it. Well, I've even been guilty. The first time mine went off after post accident, my wife and I, we were doing a run up. We were en route to Florida at an airport. And it started going off, and she goes, "What's that beeping noise?" And I said, "I don't know." And it just didn't connect, and that was even on the panel. So you have to be aware of it.
Yeah.
What brands? Like, can you recommend a brand or two? People are asking what the best one out there is.
Well, I don't know what the best one is. I think they're all pretty good. I'm partial to SensorCon, and the only reason I am is after this all happened on the forums. Particularly in Mooney space, we were talking about what would be the best one to get. And some people had the SensorCon one. And I reached out to a couple different companies, seeing if we could get a group discount because we're Mooney pilots. We're notoriously cheap. So we were seeing if we could get a group buy that was inexpensive. And they were the first ones to enthusiastically offer one. And they did that. And at first I thought there would be about 20 of us. And so far, it's been over 1,000, I believe, that have been bought under these codes that they've been offering pilots.
Well, I bought one after the thing. Even though I had the one already on my panel, I went ahead and bought the SensorCon and used the discount you had told us to use.
Yeah, it's great. They're a good company. Their customer service is good. The product seems really robust. It's an industrial. It's made for the industrial service. So a lot of fire departments and that type of people use them, and they're just kind of nice all around units. But like I say, any of the what I call high resolution ones, any of the ones that'll read parts per million, down from 0 on up, I think are great. They're a great tool for just maintenance in general, troubleshooting the airplane. So in my particular case, if I had one, it would have picked up the CO well before this happened. Well before. I mean, if it happened, if that crack happened with the backfire, it would have picked it up immediately then. There's been people online that have found, well, a good way to test the muffler, the heat system, is just to hold the CO detector in front of the heat vent, leave the heat off, see what it reads, and then open it, and then watch what it reads. And if there's a rise, and if that rise is repeatable each time, like you're testing carb heat, which I do this every run up now. But if you notice a rise, you know there's a compromise there. And a lot of times that rise will only be, say, 8 parts per million or something. Well, that's not enough to be a danger, but it's enough to show that something is going on, and you can investigate and fix it. And that's well before it's an emergency, and it's when you can fix it on your own schedule with your own mechanic rather than being stuck, 600 miles from home.
Okay, so we didn't have time when we shot the interview to really go into some of the stuff after, but let's do some of your takeaways coming out of this crash. The things that you've done now for gear, the things you've done for placement of iPads and things like that. Talk
Sure.
us through your takeaway.
Well, the first one is the iPad thing. I had my iPad mounted on my yoke with a RAM mount.
Which I do too.
And RAMs are tough. We found that out. I was wearing a shoulder harness. A lot of people had asked about that. Also very critical. If you're flying a legacy airplane that doesn't have shoulder harnesses, you really want to do it immediately and put them in. So many accidents aren't survivable. Simple, where you do everything right, but you don't have a shoulder harness and you don't make it because of blunt force trauma, as they always say. And I did have it, and I had this huge diagonal bruise across my chest. And I still ended up breaking my jaw, knocking out teeth. So it's really important to wear shoulder harnesses. But that said, I had my iPad on the yoke, and that, I believe, the RAM mount was broke. The iPad was bent a little bit. I believe that combination broke my jaw and knocked out my teeth. So I still like having the iPad in front of me. But what I've switched to is, I think the brand is Scoshi. It's a Scoshi magnetic mount. So it just magnets right onto the yoke, and it sort of breaks away. So if there's a significant deceleration again in the future, the iPad initially is going to move the same direction as me and hopefully not pack as much of a punch as it did fixed to that yoke. So I like that it's a breakaway. Another side benefit to that breakaway thing is the Scoshi mount allows you to just pull it off and look at it, show it to someone if you need to, and stick it back on the yoke. And the RAM was a little more cumbersome with that.
How do you spell that brand, Scoshi?
I think it's, don't quote me on it. I'm the worst speller in the world. It's SCH something, I think.
Hey, out there, if you guys, anybody knows about that, make a comment about that. We'd like to find out more. But go on, Dan.
So that got me thinking a lot about just how things are mounted in the panel in general. And people put things on their glare shield, and they put iPad mounts on the side window and all over. And I think it's just important to think about in a forced landing, where are these things going to go? How are they going to affect the passengers, and what's going to happen to the outcome? So that's one takeaway. A big one also was, I mentioned in the video before that I had everything on my seat next to me, and I thought I was very organized. And after I woke up, the airplane was rearranged. I couldn't find a single thing. And it taught me how important it was to keep stuff fixed to you or fixed to the airplane. There's a good chance you're not going to be able to move. You're going to be pinned or injured or whatever. So you're going to want to be able to reach things. And that's why I wear that flight vest now, and I can put in whatever I need for that particular trip. My seat belt, the shoulder harness has my EPIRB strapped to it. It has a flashlight that has a built-in strobe. Both of those things in this accident would have really helped. I probably wouldn't have had to crawl out of the airplane. Someone would have pulled me out. Also, I have a handheld radio mounted next to my left knee that's hard mounted, so I always will have that. And like I said, I couldn't find a thing. So you gotta wear whatever is you're going to need immediately.
Okay. All right. And some of the questions and people that are asking is price range for a good CO detector. I know from my own experience, the cheapest good ones like $80 or $90, and Sporty sells that one for $150.
Yeah, and the sensor cons with the discount come in. I think their base model, which is good enough for GA use.
Yeah, I bought the base model.
Yeah, the base model is good. I think it's only like $110 or $120.
I think even less with the discount. What? And by the way, somebody was asking. They missed it. What is the discount for the sensor con?
I knew you were going to ask me that, and that was up on your other video. What I wrote it down.
Yeah, it is.
Aircraft 2020 is the discount now. I think all small.
Aircraft 2020. When you go
there, I'll write it in the chat.
There you go.
And that's if you buy it from where?
Buy it direct from SensorCon.
And then while we're doing that, I'm going to answer a couple of really quick questions. You can chime in too, Dan. They're asking, did your ELT go off? Which I know it did, but those things are hard to localize, and they were in the area, but they're flying over a dark field at night with trees everywhere. They weren't going to see you, were they?
Yeah, no. So I still only had the 120.15 ELT. And if I had a 406, it would have, which is important. That should be on everyone's upgrade list too, if you don't have one yet. But I just had the 121.5, and the helicopter that was flying over was a medevac or medlink helicopter. So it didn't have sophisticated equipment to track the ELT signal. And like I believe the Civil Air Patrol and things, they have ability to kind of pinpoint it better. But for these guys, it was just they could hear it going off. So it's real important. Yeah, 406, and then they would have coordinates relayed to the search and rescue, whoever that would be. And that's another thing with the handheld radio I mentioned when I was on the show. I had always believed that I owned one in case I had a comm failure. It turns out you use them for an emergency after you're on the ground, because then you can talk to. There's always someone listening to on guard above you. This helicopter would have been. I could have directed them to me rather than sit there and wait.
Okay. All right. Good. There was a couple other questions. Tamara has located the Skoshi Magic Mount.
Yeah, that's it.
And Waukesha pilot, always quick with the answers, as we learned from Brian Turner's game night, has also put it there. Okay, so you got the discounts, everything else with SensorCon. We also we talked about your gear, your placement. Any other final takeaways that you have from this crash that you would want to share with the general aviation?
Well, I didn't have a chance to take notes. I wanted to answer some questions and kind of fix things, but I didn't. One about detectors. A lot of times people think, why would I spend $120 on a detector? I can go to Home Depot and get one for $19 for the home one and throw it in the back. And that's definitely better than what I had, right? That's a much better solution. But in terms of aviation, it's not a very good one. They build those so to avoid false positives. Did I talk about this on the last show? I don't know. But to avoid false positives, they build them so they need a set amount of CO for a set amount of time before they even go off. So, and it's pretty high on some of them. So you could be sitting at 200 parts per million for a couple hours, land, and go to lunch and do whatever, and that thing won't go off. So it's important to have something that's more of a high resolution one. The other thing is, like I said, with the high resolution ones, you can really learn your airplane and you can troubleshoot it to find out where the problem is. You can kind of use it like an engine monitor. An engine monitor, a high EGT will give you information to go look for something or some different thing going on. And with these, you can go investigate and find out where there's a problem. And I think they're worth every penny in that regard.
I think so too. I knew when we got the plane, I want to say Robert Johnson who used to own my plane, 2 owners back before. I remember talking with him, and I think it was him that told me, as soon as you get that plane, if it has a tab in there, throw it away.
Yeah.
And get electronics. So So I ordered that expensive one off of Sporty's, and I had to replace it after a year, and the batteries were a pain to change, but it gave me something to do on the long cross countries.
Sure.
And then I bought the cheaper one that that's non-aviation, but it's still portable. It's that black one that there's a review somebody did with the 3 SensorCon and forensics. I don't know. It may be a forensics type. I don't remember. Anyway, and that one's a pain to change with batteries, but I just got the SensorCon in, so I'm looking.
The SensorCon battery isn't too bad. There's 4 screws. You take the back off, and there's a CR123A battery, which is that camera battery you can kind of get at Walmart or wherever. So
yeah, the forensics was the watch battery that you're never going to have with you.
Yeah.
And then, but worse, that Sporty's one, which I don't know who the manufacturer is, but it's the one they sell. The Sporty's one, that battery is, I had to go to a bunch of different stores just to find it.
Yeah.
It was not easy to find. So, and I'm adding to my checklist to turn it off just to save battery. Yeah.
It's important to know too that none of them on the market are an infinite life on the sensor. They all have expirations for the sensor itself.
Oh.
Some of the home ones, they'll go 10 years. None of the higher resolution ones will stretch it out that far. SensorCon's literature wants you to calibrate it. They say you should calibrate it every 6 months if you want it to maintain accuracy. And if you look at how much it drifts in accuracy for aviation, that the calibration is unneeded. It doesn't drift much. So we're basically looking for just changes in the amount of CO and low amounts. So if it's really 10 parts per million and we're showing 16, that doesn't really matter.
Right.
But they, after 2 years, they have an end of life error will come up if it hasn't been calibrated. But when you start it, but then it continues to operate normally. And then for calibration, you can either send it back to them or find somebody that has a test gas, and it's a real simple procedure to calibrate it. In fact, I have test gas that I would bring to Oshkosh, and then just anybody that wants to get theirs calibrated could find me, and we can do it. And any sort of a donation helps, but
right.
But yeah, so it's pretty simple. And I was talking with SensorCon, and they were thinking about coming up with a discount for pilots for calibration also, or some sort of a program
that'd be
to
great.
make it easier.
So what is your life like now? I mean, you have a full-time job, right? This isn't, you're not a full-time go around preaching about the evils of carbon monoxide. I mean,
yeah, that doesn't pay very well, I can tell you. I have a small manufacturing business, and still doing that, and just flying on the side, just like all the rest of us, except for Christy, of course. She gets to go after the fun stuff.
Oh yeah. No, this right here, you see this?
Yeah.
This is the fun stuff.
Yeah, it is.
The Wong Warrior, this is the fun stuff.
So if Steve is allowed to get an RV-8, what happens to the Warrior?
Oh, we get his and hers airplane.
Oh, perfect.
There's no way.
Won't complain about that.
She'll
wait, which is his?
Get rid of Wong Warrior.
I think you know the answer to that, Dan.
I don't know. I think you'd probably commandeer the 8s pretty quick.
Yeah.
No, actually, I'm quite happy with my Warrior. This is definitely my airplane. I don't know. Steve's in the chat. He's welcome to answer.
Oh, is he? All right.
He is in the chat.
Well, and Dan, real quick while we're doing that, I'm going to address a question that's happened. Is there anything that you do pre-flight to assure it doesn't happen again? And you touched on it a little bit earlier when you said that you take your sensor and you hold it to the heater, and you get a benchmark first with no heat. Then you pull the heater vent open, and then you see if you have any kind of rise whatsoever. So that's one of the things you do for pre-flight. Is there anything else you do?
No, that's pretty it. I mean, my current airplane, being that it is a turbo, I inspect the exhaust a little closer than I would have before, and part of that is more just because it's a turbo. But it's standard pre-flight, and then like I said, I use the sensor con at run up to check the heat, and that's only showing the one way for CO to get into the cabin. There's multiple other ways for it to find its way in, which is also interesting. I don't know if we touched on that last time,
No,
but the data shows FAA did a study and they took all the CO related accidents, over a 25, 30-year period. And it showed that there was no correlation between geographical regions and time of year. So a lot of people think it's only heaters, and they think that if they're in Florida flying around all the time, they don't really need a carbon monoxide detector. But the fact that we have an internal combustion engine in front of us and the exhaust exits in front of us on most airplanes, where there's always a way for it to find its way in if something bad happens.
All right. Well, thanks for coming back, Christy. You dropped.
Yeah, sorry, I had to plug in my thing, and in doing so, I accidentally closed the app. So.
All right. Well, this has been really, really good. We're already at an hour 43.
I didn't come.
No, we're just over an hour. That's right. We started at 6:30, not 6.
I didn't get logged in till after.
Oh, I know, and I'm sorry about that. I thought the software made it easy, but I guess it hasn't.
Well, I had the wrong browser.
Somebody did ask, has Dan added anything to your flight bag? And you did mention this earlier, but just for the latecomers, real quick, list the things now that you carry. I would say you mentioned something on the seatbelt. You mentioned your flight vest. Let's consider all that. What are the things you now carry?
Okay. Well, I make sure my handheld radio is charged and is mounted next to me. On the shoulder strap, I have the PLB mounted, and I have a flashlight mounted with a strobe. Inside the flight vest, it might change a little bit depending on what the flight is, but that's where I'll store my cell phone to keep it on me if I need it. I have a few other things in there that I probably a little overkill, but just because I have them, I have like little water packets. So if I'm stuck in the plane sometime, it's a little 3-ounce packet of water. I have a signal mirror. I have a signal whistle so if I'm stranded and someone's hiking through the woods, they can try to find me. And I have a seatbelt cutter, that type of thing.
All right. Okay. And, for those who are wondering what he's talking about, the flight vest, if you watch our first episode, the In the Hangar special with Dan, you'll see that what he's wearing is the flight vest.
Mm-hmm. If Matt could link that video, that would be great.
There you go. He can do that.
Thanks, Matt.
Where'd you get that?
Well, that's a Scotty vest, and they're made for travel. They're not the best flight vests, so to speak, because their pockets are very concealed. But you don't look like a fisherman, getting out of your plane. So it's
or photographer and Nat Geo photographer.
But in reality, a more functional flight vest would be like more of a fishing vest or a photography vest, something that has a mount on the outside. This particular vest, it's a little more, non kind of intrusive. When you get out of the airplane, you look kind of normal, but it is harder to get things out of it. So first, I might change into something more utilitarian.
All right. So Matt has put the link to the episode where you tell your story, and really, I don't have anything else unless you guys out there have any last questions.
I'm good. I'm actually going to go fly now because I'm watching all these airplanes, and there's a lot of people out here.
You got about 20 minutes before you get your night currency.
Hey, I might just do both.
So, all right. Well, Dan, thank you so much for taking time and working through the technical trouble we had to get you.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry about that.
Oh, no. I just appreciate you taking time to tell this because it is truly an amazing story, and I'm so glad you survived. I bet your wife and family is too.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
Thank you, everybody, for joining me today in the hangar.
Yeah, really in the hangar. And all right. So, Dan, thank you. And all you guys out there, thank you. And please like and subscribe. And, we appreciate all you guys watching our videos. And I hope you like it. We're hoping to bring you more and more live. We're going to still keep putting out all the in the hangars over the next few months. And just so you guys know, all our in the hangars were shot before the virus hit. So we were not practicing social distancing. So still for another 4 months, all the in the hangars will not be displaying proper distancing or have proper COVID beards.
I'm working on mine.
You need to work hard. All right, guys. Well, thanks, Christy. Thank you, guys.
Right.
Thank you, Matt Wells. And we'll see you guys next time.
See you next time in the hangar.